The moment I heard the knock on my door during the middle of a thunderstorm, I knew something ridiculous was about to happen. I opened it to find Brenda Patterson standing there, soaked to the bone, holding a clipboard like it was the Holy Grail. She was the HOA president of Meadowbrook Estates in Charlotte, North Carolina, and she had that particular look on her face that told me she was about to make my life difficult. "Thomas Zimmerman," she said, her voice sharp despite the rain dripping off her nose. "I need to speak with you about your generator." I looked past her at the darkness beyond my porch. The power had gone out 20 minutes ago, and my whole house was lit up like Christmas, while the rest of the neighborhood sat in darkness. My backup generator, a beast of a machine I had installed last year after hurricane season knocked out power for a week, was humming away in my backyard. "What about it?" I asked, not inviting her in. "The clubhouse needs power," she said, as if that explained everything. "Our emergency meeting about the storm damage assessment cannot proceed without electricity, and you're the only one with a working generator." I stared at her. "So go to the clubhouse and wait for the power to come back on like everyone else." Her eyes narrowed. "Thomas, as per Section 12.7 of the HOA bylaws, residents are required to assist in community emergencies. I am hereby requesting that you share your generator with the clubhouse for the duration of this power outage." I had read those bylaws front to back when I bought this house 3 years ago. Section 12.7 was about maintaining common areas, not commandeering private property. But Brenda had a habit of interpreting rules however she wanted. "My generator powers my house," I said slowly. "It's not portable, and it's certainly not powerful enough to run both my home and your clubhouse. Besides, there's nothing in the bylaws that says I have to share my private equipment." "I will be filing a formal complaint," she said, her voice rising. "This is exactly the kind of selfish behavior that tears communities apart." "File whatever you want," I replied. "My generator stays here." She turned on her heel and marched back into the storm, and I closed the door, thinking that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, after the power had been restored around 3 in the morning, I found a letter taped to my door. It was an official HOA notice informing me that I was being fined $500 for failure to assist in a community emergency, and that my generator installation was under review for potential code violations. There would be a mandatory hearing in 3 days. I called my neighbor, Marcus, who lived 2 houses down. He was the only reasonable person on the HOA board, though he was outvoted constantly by Brenda and her cronies. "Yeah, she's serious," Marcus confirmed over the phone. "She called an emergency board meeting at 7 this morning. Brenda's convinced you violated community guidelines. I voted against the fine, but it was 4-1. "This is insane," I said. "My generator is on my property, installed with all proper permits from the county. The HOA has no jurisdiction over it." "You know Brenda doesn't care about that," Marcus sighed. "She's got it in her head that you embarrassed her by refusing to help. Now she's on a warpath." The hearing was scheduled for Thursday evening at the clubhouse. I spent the next 3 days gathering documentation. My installation permits, the county electrical inspection reports, photographs of my generator setup, and a printed copy of the actual HOA bylaws with the relevant sections highlighted. I even called my lawyer, Gary Fletcher, who specialized in property law. "They can't force you to share private property," Gary confirmed. "And they certainly can't fine you for refusing. If they try to enforce this, we can fight it, but HOA disputes are messy. Sometimes it's easier to just sell and move." "I'm not moving," I said firmly. "I put too much work into this house." Thursday came, and I walked into the clubhouse at exactly 7 o'clock. The building was one of those generic community centers with beige walls, folding tables, and uncomfortable chairs. Brenda sat at the head table with 4 other board members: Sharon Miller, Robert Davidson, Patricia Cruz, and Marcus. About a dozen other residents filled the audience seats, clearly there for the entertainment. "This hearing will come to order," Brenda announced, banging a gavel that I was pretty sure she bought herself because it definitely was not official. "We are here to address the violations committed by Thomas Zimmerman regarding his refusal to assist during the storm emergency and the unauthorized installation of equipment on his property." "Unauthorized," I interrupted. "I have county permits for everything." "The HOA was not consulted," Brenda snapped. "Section 8.3 requires all exterior modifications to be approved by the Architectural Review Committee." I pulled out my folder. "I submitted my plans 14 months ago. Here's the approval letter, signed by Patricia Cruz, who was the committee chair at the time." Patricia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Brenda's face reddened. "That approval did not include the current configuration," she said, though I could tell she was scrambling. "And regardless, you still violated community emergency protocols by refusing to share resources." "Show me in the bylaws where it says I have to share my private generator," I challenged. For the next hour, it went back and forth. Brenda kept citing vague sections about community cooperation and emergency procedures. I kept pointing out that none of those sections actually required residents to surrender private property. The other board members mostly stayed quiet, except Marcus, who tried to suggest dropping the whole thing. "This is ridiculous," Marcus finally said. "Tom followed all the rules. He got permits. He got HOA approval. He has every right to keep his generator for his own use." "He humiliated me in front of the entire community," Brenda said, and there it was, the real reason for all this. Her ego was bruised. "That's not a violation," I said. "That's you being upset that I said no." "The fine stands," Brenda declared. $500 due within 30 days. Additionally, the board will be conducting a full review of your property for any other potential violations. This hearing is adjourned." She banged her ridiculous gavel again, and I walked out, furious but not surprised. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated. I received 3 more violation notices. One for having my trash cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours. I had forgotten to bring them in after collection day. One for a non-approved lawn ornament, a garden gnome my mother had given me. And one for having a car parked on my driveway with expired registration, my old pickup truck that I was in the process of selling. Each violation came with a $100 fine. "She's harassing you," Gary said when I called him. "Document everything. We might need to file a restraining order or sue for harassment." But I had a different idea forming in my head. See, when I had done my research on the community before buying my house, I had discovered something interesting about the clubhouse. It was owned by the HOA collectively, meaning all homeowners technically had an ownership stake in it. But more importantly, the electrical system for the clubhouse was old and barely up to code. The building was powered through a main line that connected to a junction box on the property border between the clubhouse lot and my lot. That junction box was technically on my property. The previous owner had allowed the connection as a favor to the community, but there was no formal easement. I had discovered this when I was doing the survey work for my generator installation. My surveyor had flagged it as a potential issue, noting that the HOA was using my property for electrical access without proper documentation. At the time, I had not cared. I figured it was no big deal to let them keep using it. But now, with Brenda making my life miserable, I was reconsidering. I called Gary back. Can I legally disconnect something on my property if someone else is using it without an easement? There was a pause. What are you thinking, Tom? The clubhouse power line crosses my property. There's no recorded easement for it. Can I remove it? Gary was quiet for a moment. Legally, yes. If they're using your property without permission and there's no easement on record, you have the right to remove encroachments. But this is going to cause a huge fight. I'm already in a huge fight, I said. At least this way I'm fighting back. I hired an electrician, Carlos Rodriguez, who came out and confirmed what I already knew. The junction box was definitely on my property, about 3 feet over the boundary line. The electrical connection to the clubhouse could be disconnected without affecting my own power. You want me to just cut it off? Carlos asked, scratching his head. I want you to safely disconnect the line and remove the junction box from my property, I said. I'll notify the HOA that they're encroaching, and they can make proper arrangements to reroute their power through their own property. Carlos shrugged. Your property, your call. I can do it tomorrow afternoon. I drafted a formal letter to the HOA board, citing the property encroachment and giving them 72 hours to make arrangements for removing their electrical connection from my land. I sent it certified mail and kept copies of everything. Brenda called me within 2 hours of receiving the letter. This is extortion, she screamed into the phone. It's property rights, I replied calmly. You're using my land without permission or easement. I'm asking you to stop. You can't just cut off the clubhouse power. I can disconnect unauthorized electrical connections on my property, I said. You have 3 days to make other arrangements. I suggest you call an electrician. She hung up on me, but I knew this was just beginning. The next morning, I received a hand-delivered letter from the HOA threatening legal action if I interfered with the clubhouse utilities. The letter claimed that the electrical connection was protected under implied easement due to its long-term use. I forwarded it to Gary, who laughed. Implied easement for utilities requires proof that it was established with the property's original development and that it's necessary for the property's use. You can fight that easily. Plus, they'd have to sue you, which would cost them tens of thousands in legal fees. Call their bluff. I called Carlos. We're still on for tomorrow. Yeah, man. I'll be there at 2. That night, Brenda showed up at my door again, this time with Robert Davidson, the HOA treasurer. Robert was a nervous little man who always looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Tom, let's be reasonable, Robert said, trying to smile. Brenda may have been a bit overzealous with the fines. What if we drop them in exchange for leaving the power connection alone? And the property review, I asked. Brenda's jaw tightened. The review is standard procedure. So you'll keep harassing me with made-up violations while I pay for you to have electricity? We're trying to compromise, Robert pleaded. Here's my compromise, I said. Drop all the fines, drop the review, issue a formal apology for the harassment, and establish a proper easement agreement for the power line with appropriate compensation for the use of my property. Then we can talk. Absolutely not, Brenda snapped. We're not paying you for something we've been using for free for 20 years. Then I guess we have nothing to talk about, I said and closed the door. Friday afternoon came. Carlos showed up with his truck and equipment at 2 o'clock sharp, just as he had promised. I had taken the afternoon off work specifically for this. The weather was perfect, sunny and clear, totally unlike the storm from 2 weeks ago. You're sure about this? Carlos asked one more time. Positive. He got to work. The disconnection took about 45 minutes. He carefully shut off the power flow, disconnected the wires, removed the junction box, and capped everything off safely and up to code. By 3 o'clock, The clubhouse was without electricity, and my property was clear of encroachments. "All done," Carlos said, packing up his tools. "I documented everything and took photos. Here's your receipt." I paid him and thanked him for his work. Then I sat on my back porch with a cold beer and waited. It took 17 minutes. Brenda came storming across the lawn between our properties, her face purple with rage. "Turn it back on right now." "Turn what back on?" I asked innocently. "You know exactly what. The clubhouse has no power." "That's unfortunate," I said. "You should probably call an electrician or the power company. You deliberately cut our power." "I removed an unauthorized electrical connection from my private property," I corrected. "As I informed you I would be doing in my letter. You had 72 hours to make arrangements." "That was yesterday." "That's right, which means your time was up." The disconnection happened exactly when I said it would. Sharon Miller joined Brenda, looking flustered. "Tom, we have a yoga class scheduled in the clubhouse in 30 minutes. 20 people are coming. You might want to cancel it," I suggested. "This is illegal," Brenda shrieked. "I'm calling the police." "Please do," I said calmly. "And while you're at it, you might want to ask them about the laws regarding property encroachment." Brenda actually did call the police. 2 officers showed up about 20 minutes later. I recognized one of them, Officer James Martinez, from a neighborhood watch meeting last year. "What's going on, Mr. Zimmerman?" Officer Martinez asked. I explained the situation calmly, showing him the property survey, the photos of the disconnection, and the letter I had sent to the HOA. Brenda interrupted constantly, calling it sabotage and vandalism, and about 6 other things that made no legal sense. "Madam, please," Officer Martinez finally said. "Mr. Zimmerman is correct. If the electrical connection was on his property without a recorded easement, he has the right to remove it. This is a civil property matter, not a criminal one." "But our clubhouse has no power," Brenda protested. "Then you'll need to make arrangements with the power company or an electrician to establish service through your own property," the other officer said. "There's nothing we can do here." After the police left, Brenda stood on my lawn, shaking with fury. "You haven't heard the last of this." "Probably not," I agreed. "But right now I'm going to finish my beer. You're trespassing on my lawn, by the way. That's Section 19.4 of the bylaws." She left, and I allowed myself a small moment of satisfaction. Over the weekend the HOA scrambled. I heard through Marcus that they had called multiple electricians, all of whom quoted several $1,000s to run a new power line from the street to the clubhouse through the HOA's own property. It would require trenching, permits, and possibly dealing with other utility lines. The cheapest estimate was $8,000, and it would take at least 2 weeks to schedule and complete. In the meantime, the clubhouse was useless. The Saturday morning book club was canceled. The Sunday afternoon community meeting was relocated to Brenda's house, which apparently went terribly because her house was not big enough for everyone. The exercise equipment sat silent. The community kitchen could not be used for the meal prep program that some of the elderly residents relied on. By Monday, my phone was ringing constantly. Residents were calling, some angry, some pleading, asking me to restore the power. "It's not about you," I told each of them. "Your HOA president has been harassing me for weeks over my own private generator. Instead of dropping the issue, she escalated. She can fix this any time she wants." Some understood. Many did not. I started getting dirty looks when I left for work in the morning. Tuesday afternoon, I received a formal notice that the HOA was suing me for damages related to the power disconnection. They were claiming $10,000 in losses and demanding I restore the connection immediately. I forwarded it to Gary, who called me back an hour later laughing. This is the dumbest lawsuit I've seen in months. They have no case. You want to countersue for the harassment?" "Not yet," I said. "Let's see how desperate they get." Wednesday evening, there was a knock on my door. This time it was not Brenda but Patricia, Cruz, and Marcus. "Tom, can we come in?" Marcus asked. I let them inside. Patricia looked uncomfortable while Marcus just looked tired. "This has gotten out of hand," Marcus said. "Brenda's refusing to negotiate and the rest of the board is split. Half of us think she went too far, but she's the president and she's not backing down." "So what do you want from me?" I asked. Patricia spoke up. "What would it take for you to restore the connection temporarily while we work out a permanent solution? Drop the lawsuit, drop all the fines, end the property review, and issue a written apology," I said. "Plus, you establish a proper easement agreement with fair compensation, or you pay to run your own power line. Those are my terms." "Brenda will never agree to apologize," Patricia said. "Then Brenda can sit in a dark clubhouse," I replied. They left looking defeated, and I felt a small twinge of guilt. But I reminded myself that I had not started this fight. I had just finished it. Thursday morning, I woke up to find my truck's tires slashed. All 4 of them, cut deep enough that they were completely unsalvageable. I called the police immediately. Officer Martinez came back out along with a detective, Catherine Wells. "You have any idea who might have done this?" Detective Wells asked. "I'm in a dispute with the HOA," I said. "I can't prove anything, but the timing is suspicious." She took a report and checked with my neighbors, but no one had seen anything. The detective said they would investigate, but without evidence or witnesses, there was not much they could do. The tires cost me $1,200 to replace. I filed a claim with my insurance, but I had to pay the $500 deductible. I called Gary. "This is escalating. Someone slashed my tires." "File a police report, document everything, and consider adding it to a restraining order request if we can connect it to the HOA harassment," he advised. Friday brought another community meeting, this time held at the local library because the clubhouse was still powerless. Marcus called me beforehand to warn me it was going to be ugly. "Brenda's painting you as the villain," he said. "She's telling everyone you're destroying the community out of spite. She's the one who started fining me over nothing," I pointed out. "I know. But she's got half the neighborhood convinced that you're the problem." I decided to attend the meeting. If Brenda wanted to make me the villain, I was going to defend myself. The library meeting room was packed. About 50 residents filled the chairs, and the tension was obvious the moment I walked in. Conversation stopped. People stared. Brenda stood at the front with the other board members. Her eyes locked onto me, and she looked triumphant, like she had been hoping I would show up. "Now that we're all here," she began, "I want to address the situation with the clubhouse. As you all know, Thomas Zimmerman deliberately disconnected our power as retaliation for legitimate HOA enforcement actions. Legitimate harassment," I called out from the back. "You are out of order," Brenda snapped. "No, you're out of order," I shot back, standing up. "You've been harassing me for weeks because I refused to let you commandeer my private generator. You fined me $500 for violating rules that don't exist. You started a property review to nitpick every tiny thing you could find. And when I defended myself by removing your illegal electrical connection from my property, you sued me." "The connection was not illegal," Brenda insisted. "There's no recorded easement," I said, pulling out the property survey. "I have documentation. Your electrical line was encroaching on my property without permission. I had every legal right to remove it." "You could have given us time to establish an easement," Roberts said weakly. "I gave you 72 hours. You chose to threaten me with a lawsuit instead of negotiating." Some of the residents were murmuring now, looking between Brenda and me with uncertainty. "Let me explain what really happened," I continued. "During the storm 2 weeks ago, Brenda showed up at my house demanding I share my generator with the clubhouse. I explained that my generator powers my home and isn't portable. She claimed the bylaws required me to share private property during emergencies. They don't. When I refused, she retaliated with baseless fines and harassment. Now she's trying to make me look like the bad guy because I stopped letting her use my property for free. You're destroying our community," someone shouted from the middle of the room. "I'm protecting my property rights," I replied. "If Brenda had approached me reasonably from the start, we wouldn't be here, but she decided to wage war over her bruised ego." "This is slander," Brenda said, her voice shaking. "It's documented fact," I corrected. "I have copies of every violation notice, every fine, every letter. I even have the transcript from the hearing where you admitted the real reason you were angry was that I humiliated you." The room fell silent. Several board members would not meet Brenda's eyes. Marcus stood up. "I think we need to acknowledge that this situation has been mishandled from the beginning. Tom is right that he followed proper procedures for his generator installation. He got permits and HOA approval. The fines issued were questionable at best. And legally, he has the right to remove encroachments from his property." "Whose side are you on?" Brenda demanded. "The side of sanity," Marcus replied. "This is costing us money we don't have. The lawsuit is going to fail and cost us legal fees. The power restoration is going to cost $8,000 minimum. We've alienated a homeowner who was following the rules. This needs to end." "I agree," Patricia said quietly. Several other residents nodded. Brenda looked around the room, realizing she was losing support. "Fine. What do you want, Thomas?" "I already told Patricia and Marcus," I said. "Drop the lawsuit, drop all the fines, end the harassment, issue a written apology, and either pay for a proper easement or run your own power line. Those terms are non-negotiable." "The board will discuss it," Brenda said stiffly. "You do that," I replied and walked out. The next day, Saturday, I got a call from Marcus. "The board met this morning. Brenda voted against accepting your terms, but she was outvoted 4-1. We're officially dropping the lawsuit and all fines. The property review is canceled. Brenda refused to sign an apology, so the rest of us signed it instead. I'm bringing it over this afternoon." "What about the easement?" I asked. "We're going to pay for a new power line." "We don't have $8,000 in the budget, so we're going to have to do a special assessment on all homeowners. It's going to be about $150 each. People are going to love that," I said. "Brenda's probably going to get voted out at the next election," Marcus said. "People are already circulating a petition. But that's not your problem. I'll bring the apology letter by around 2. True to his word, Marcus showed up at 2 with an official letter on HOA letterhead, signed by 4 of the 5 board members. It acknowledged that the fines had been issued in error, that I had followed all proper procedures, and that the HOA regretted the dispute. It was not exactly a heartfelt apology, but it was official and documented. "Brenda's furious," Marcus said. "She's been holed up in her house since the meeting. I think she knows her time as president is done." "Good," I said. "Maybe the next president will be reasonable." Over the following week, the HOA hired an electrician to run a new power line to the clubhouse through their own property. It ended up costing $9,200 after they hit complications with underground drainage lines. The special assessment notice went out to all homeowners, and from what I heard, Brenda became even more unpopular when people realized they were being charged because of her vendetta against me. The clubhouse got power back on a Wednesday afternoon. 12 days after I had disconnected it. I watched from my backyard as the lights came on. It felt like closure, but the story was not quite over. The following Saturday, I was doing yard work when a car pulled up that I did not recognize. A woman in her 30s got out, carrying a briefcase. "Thomas Zimmerman," she asked. "That's me." "I'm Linda Harper with the county attorney's office. I'm here to discuss some HOA matters that have been brought to our attention." My stomach dropped. "What kind of matters?" she smiled. "Don't worry, you're not in trouble." We received a complaint from several Meadowbrook Estates residents about HOA financial irregularities. During our review, we discovered some concerning patterns. "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" I invited her inside, and she spread several documents across my kitchen table. "Your HOA president, Brenda Patterson, has been signing checks to herself over the past 18 months, Linda explained. "Small amounts, usually under $500, listed as reimbursements for various community expenses. We're talking about office supplies, maintenance services, event planning costs. The problem is, we can't find receipts or documentation for most of these expenses. We estimate she's taken around $14,000 from the HOA funds." I stared at the papers. "She's been embezzling." "That's what it looks like. The investigation is ongoing, but I wanted to ask if you had noticed anything unusual in your dealings with her." I thought about it. She was always very defensive about money. Anytime someone questioned HOA spending, she would shut down the conversation. "I just thought she was controlling." "Did she ever ask you for money directly, just the fines, which were bogus and got dropped?" Linda nodded, making notes. "Thank you. We'll be conducting a full audit of the HOA finances. If we find sufficient evidence of embezzlement, there will be criminal charges." After she left, I called Marcus immediately. "Did you know the county is investigating Brenda for embezzlement?" "What?" He sounded shocked. "No, I had no idea. Apparently she's been writing herself checks for months. $14,000. Marcus was quiet for a moment. That would explain why she was so adamant about collecting fines from everyone. She needed to cover the missing money. "You need to get ahead of this," I said. "Call an emergency board meeting and secure all the financial records before she can destroy evidence." Marcus agreed, and I hung up feeling vindicated. Brenda had not just been petty and vindictive. She had been stealing from the community. The next few days were chaotic in Meadowbrook Estates. Marcus called an emergency board meeting without Brenda's approval, citing fiduciary responsibility. They brought in an independent accountant to review the books. Brenda tried to block access to the financial records, but the other board members outvoted her and changed the bank account passwords. The accountant confirmed what the county had suspected. Brenda had been systematically embezzling money through fake reimbursements. The total was actually closer to $18,000 once they found all the transactions. She had been using multiple categories to hide the theft: landscaping, maintenance, supplies, event costs. Each individual transaction was small enough not to raise immediate red flags, but together, they added up to significant fraud. The HOA board voted unanimously, with Brenda abstaining, to remove her as president and report the findings to the county attorney. They also filed a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen funds. On a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after I had disconnected the clubhouse power, Brenda Patterson was arrested at her home. I was not there to see it, but Marcus called me with the news. "They charged her with embezzlement and fraud," he said. "Her bail was set at $50,000. "Good," I said simply. "There's more," Marcus continued. "During the financial review, we found that she had been inflating vendor quotes and pocketing the difference. Remember when we had the pool renovated last year? She claimed it cost $35,000, but the actual invoice was only $28,000. She kept the $7,000. How did she get away with it for so long? She controlled all the financial information and intimidated anyone who asked questions. We were all too passive. We should have demanded transparency. Well, it's caught up with her now, I said. The criminal case moved through the system over the following months. Brenda's lawyer tried to argue that the money was legitimate reimbursements and that she had simply been disorganized with receipts. But the county attorney had too much evidence. They had traced the fake vendor payments, found deposits to Brenda's personal account that corresponded with the missing funds, and discovered that several of the companies she had claimed to pay did not exist at all. In November, 5 months after the initial confrontation over my generator, Brenda Patterson pleaded guilty to felony embezzlement. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of probation, and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. Her house, which was her primary asset, had to be sold to cover part of the debt. By that time, Meadowbrook Estates had elected a new HOA board. Marcus became the president, and they brought in several level-headed residents who were committed to transparency and reasonable governance. One of the first things they did was conduct a comprehensive review of all HOA rules and eliminate the vague provisions that Brenda had used to harass residents. They also established a formal easement agreement for utility access across property lines, though in my case, it was no longer necessary since the clubhouse had its own power line. The new board wanted to prevent future disputes by having clear documentation for everything. Life returned to normal. The harassment stopped. The ridiculous fines disappeared. I was able to enjoy my house and my generator without interference. One evening in early December, I was sitting on my back porch when Marcus came over with a 6-pack of beer. "Thought you might want one of these," he said, offering me a bottle. "Thanks," I said, accepting it. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun set behind the trees. "I owe you an apology," Marcus finally said. "I should have stood up to Brenda sooner." I knew she was being unreasonable, but I always took the easy path and just voted against her without really fighting. If I had pushed back harder from the beginning, maybe none of this would have happened. "You can't blame yourself for her choices," I said. "She was the one who decided to abuse her power. She was the one who stole money. You did what you could. Still, I could have done more." He took a long drink. "For what it's worth, I think you handled it perfectly. You stood your ground, you documented everything, and you did not let her bully you. A lot of people would have just paid the fines and moved on." "I'm stubborn," I admitted, "and I hate injustice. Once she came at me with those bogus fines, there was no way I was backing down." "The community's better off for it," Marcus said. "We got rid of a corrupt president, reformed our bylaws, and learned a valuable lesson about accountability, all because you would not share your generator." I laughed. "I guess that's one way to look at it." We finished our beers and talked about other things, easier things, like sports and holidays and plans for the new year. It felt good to have a normal conversation with a neighbor, without the constant tension of HOA drama hanging over everything. As winter settled in, I had time to reflect on everything that had happened. The whole situation had started with such a simple thing, a generator during a power outage, but it had exposed deep problems in the community's governance and ultimately led to necessary changes. I thought about Brenda sometimes, wondering what had driven her to steal from her neighbors. Was it financial desperation, entitlement, a sense that she deserved compensation for her time as HOA president? I would probably never know. But I hoped she would use her time in prison to reflect on her choices and come out better on the other side. The generator continued to sit in my backyard, humming away whenever the power went out. It had become something of a legend in the neighborhood, the machine that had sparked a revolution. Kids would point at it when they walked by. New residents would hear the story and ask to see it. I had considered writing an article about the experience for a property rights website, but Gary advised against it while Brenda's criminal case was still pending. Now that it was over, I might do it. Other homeowners dealing with abusive HOAs might benefit from knowing that they had rights and that they could fight back. In January, the new HOA board held a community barbecue at the Clubhouse to celebrate the start of a new year. It was well attended, and the mood was cheerful. People actually seemed to enjoy being together, without the undercurrent of fear that Brenda had cultivated. Marcus gave a short speech thanking everyone for their patience during the transition and outlining the board's plans for the coming year. They were going to focus on maintaining common areas, organizing community events, and staying out of homeowners' private business unless absolutely necessary. "We're here to enhance the community, not control it," Marcus said, and people applauded. I stayed for a couple of hours, eating burgers and chatting with neighbors. Several people came up to thank me for standing up to Brenda. A few apologized for initially believing her version of events. I accepted their apologies graciously and moved on. There was no point in holding grudges. As I was leaving, Patricia Cruz stopped me by the door. "Tom, I want you to know I'm sorry for my part in all of this," she said. "I should have questioned Brenda's motives from the beginning. I should have defended you at that hearing." "You eventually did the right thing," I said. "That's what matters." Still, I learned a lot from this experience, about standing up for what's right even when it's uncomfortable, so thank you for that lesson. I shook her hand and headed home, feeling genuinely good about the state of the community for the first time in months. February brought a cold snap and with it, another power outage. This one was shorter, just 3 hours, but my generator kicked in automatically and kept my house running smoothly. I looked out my window at the darkened neighborhood and thought about Brenda's demand that night back in the storm. If I had just agreed to share my generator, none of this would have happened. Brenda would still be embezzling money. The HOA would still be dysfunctional. I would probably still be getting harassed over trivial violations. Sometimes standing your ground leads to unexpected consequences. Sometimes refusing to be pushed around exposes corruption you never knew existed. Sometimes a simple no is the first step toward meaningful change. My generator hummed steadily in the backyard, powering my home, a symbol of the importance of maintaining boundaries and protecting what's yours. I had bought it for practical reasons, to keep my house running during outages. But it had become something more, a reminder that you do not have to surrender your rights just because someone in authority demands it. The power came back on, and my generator automatically shut down. The neighborhood lights flickered back to life. I made myself dinner and settled in for the evening, comfortable in my home, free from harassment, surrounded by a community that was finally learning how to function properly. It had been a hell of a fight, but it was worth it. The legal system had worked. The community had reformed. Justice had been served. And my generator, the machine that started it all, sat quietly in my backyard, ready for the next power outage, ready to do exactly what I had bought it for, keeping my home running on my terms. Months continued to pass, and spring arrived with the promise of renewal. The neighborhood seemed lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. The new HOA board was functioning smoothly, making reasonable decisions and actually listening to homeowner concerns. It was what an HOA should have been all along. In April, I received a letter from the county attorney's office informing me that Brenda had begun making restitution payments to the HOA from prison. The payments were small, just $100 a month from her prison work program, but it was something. Her house had sold in March, and the proceeds had covered about 60% of what she owed. The rest would be paid off slowly over years. I ran into Sharon Miller at the grocery store one Saturday. She had been one of Brenda's supporters initially, but she had changed her tune once the embezzlement came to light. "I still can't believe she fooled us for so long," Sharon said, shaking her head. "I trusted her completely. She was good at presenting herself as competent and in control," I said. "That's how people like that operate." "Well, I'm more careful now about who I trust," Sharon replied. "And I actually read the board meeting minutes every month. We all should have been doing that from the start." "Transparency helps," I agreed. The conversation was friendly and normal, another sign that the community was healing from the drama. In May, Marcus called me with an interesting proposition. The board wants to install a backup generator for the clubhouse. "We've got the budget for it now after cutting some unnecessary expenses. Would you be willing to give us some advice on what to buy?" I had to laugh at the irony. "Sure, I can help with that." I spent an afternoon with Marcus and the facilities committee, explaining generator options, power requirements, and maintenance needs. They ended up ordering a system similar to mine, sized appropriately for the clubhouse's electrical load. The installation happened in June, and the clubhouse finally had its own backup power, properly installed on its own property, with all necessary permits. "We should have just done this from the beginning," Marcus said as we watched the electrician finish the installation. "Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble." "Hindsight," I said with a shrug. Summer brought the neighborhood pool season, and for the first time since I had moved to Meadowbrook Estates, the community events actually felt welcoming. There were weekend barbecues, a 4th of July party, and a community garage sale that raised money for local schools. The HOA was functioning the way it should, facilitating community connections rather than enforcing petty rules. I found myself participating more, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I helped with the garage sale, attended a few board meetings to stay informed, and even volunteered to help with the pool maintenance rotation. It felt good to be part of a community that was working together rather than fighting itself. In August, exactly 1 year after the initial confrontation with Brenda, there was a major hurricane warning for the Charlotte area. Everyone prepared, stocking up on supplies and securing their properties. The storm ended up being less severe than predicted, but it did knock out power for 2 days. My generator performed perfectly. And this time, the clubhouse had its own backup power running smoothly. Several neighbors came to check on each other, sharing supplies and information. Marcus set up a charging station at the clubhouse for people who needed to power phones or medical devices. It was how a community was supposed to respond to an emergency. Working together, sharing resources voluntarily, helping those who needed it. Not demanding that people surrender private property, not threatening fines, not abusing authority. On the second evening of the outage, I sat on my porch with my generator humming in the background and my house fully lit. A few neighbors walked by, and we exchanged friendly waves. One family stopped to chat, thanking me for the advice I had given them on getting their own backup power system. "We never thought we needed one," the husband said. "But after watching what you went through and seeing how useful it is, we decided to invest in one. Best decision we ever made." "Glad I could help," I said sincerely. After they left, I thought about how strange it was that such a negative situation had led to so many positive outcomes. The community was stronger. People were more engaged. The HOA was more accountable. Neighbors were better prepared for emergencies. All because I had said no to an unreasonable demand and refused to back down when someone tried to punish me for it. The power came back on the next morning. Life returned to normal. The generator went back to its quiet standby mode, waiting for the next time it would be needed. In September, the HOA held its annual elections. Marcus ran for another term as president and won easily. The rest of the board remained stable, with one new member joining to replace someone who was moving out of state. The new member was a retired lawyer who had specifically run on a platform of ensuring the HOA stayed within its legal boundaries. "We've learned our lesson," she said at the first meeting I attended after the election. "No more overreach, no more petty enforcement, no more financial irregularities. We're going to run this association properly." True to her word, the board established new financial controls, including quarterly audits by an outside accountant and a requirement that all significant expenses be approved by majority vote. They also created a homeowner committee to review any proposed fines before they were issued, ensuring that violations were legitimate and not just vendetta-driven. These seemed like basic, obvious reforms, but they had not existed under Brenda's leadership. She had centralized power in herself and operated with minimal oversight. The new structure made that impossible. By the time October rolled around, Meadowbrook Estates was functioning better than it had in years. Property values were stable. Community engagement was up. The pool and clubhouse were well maintained. People actually seemed happy to live there. I had a moment of reflection on a cool autumn evening, sitting on my back porch with a cup of coffee. I thought about what could have happened if I had just given in to Brenda's demands that stormy night. I would have probably resented it, but I might have done it to avoid conflict. The generator would have powered the clubhouse temporarily. Brenda would have considered it a victory. And she would have continued abusing her power, embezzling money, and making life miserable for anyone who crossed her. The community would have continued suffering under dysfunctional leadership. Problems would have festered. Instead, one moment of standing firm had triggered a cascade of events that exposed corruption and led to genuine reform. It had not been pleasant. There had been stress, conflict, and even vandalism. But the end result was worth it. I learned something valuable through the experience, that defending your rights is not just about protecting yourself. Sometimes it protects others too, even if they do not realize it at the time. By refusing to be bullied, I had inadvertently started a process that saved the entire community from ongoing theft and mismanagement. In November, I received an unexpected visit from Linda Harper, the county attorney who had originally contacted me about the embezzlement investigation. "I wanted to follow up with you now that the case is completely closed," she said. "Brenda Patterson has served 6 months and is being transferred to a work release program for the remainder of her sentence. She will be working a regular job during the day and returning to a supervised facility at night." "That's faster than 18 months, I observed. "Good behavior and participation in rehabilitation programs," Linda explained. "The judge approved early work release. She will still be under supervision until her full sentence is complete." "How does the HOA feel about that?" "They've been informed. As long as she continues making restitution payments and stays away from any HOA involvement, there shouldn't be issues. Part of her probation terms specifically prohibit her from serving on any HOA board." "Good," I said. "The community's better off without her in that role." "I wanted to thank you, actually," Linda continued. "Your documentation and willingness to provide information were crucial to the case." A lot of fraud victims are hesitant to come forward or participate in prosecution. You made our job much easier. I just told the truth and provided documents, I said. That's exactly what we needed, she replied. Anyway, I wanted to close the loop with you. The case is resolved, restitution is being paid, and justice has been served. You helped make that happen. After she left, I felt a sense of closure. The entire ordeal, from the initial generator demand to the criminal prosecution, was finally complete. All the loose ends were tied up. December brought the holidays and another community event, this time a winter festival with lights, music, and food. The turnout was impressive, with families from all over Meadowbrook Estates participating. Kids played in the snow that had fallen the day before. Adults chatted and laughed around fire pits. I stood near the clubhouse, watching the scene with satisfaction. This was what community was supposed to be. People coming together voluntarily, enjoying each other's company, supporting one another. Not forced compliance, not threats and fines, not one person wielding power over others. Marcus joined me, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. He handed me one. Pretty good turnout, he said. Best one yet, I agreed. You know, I've been thinking about everything that happened last year, Marcus said. All the drama with Brenda, the power disconnection, the investigation, everything. And I realized something. If you had been a different person, someone less willing to stand up for yourself, none of this would have happened. The embezzlement would have continued, I said, right, and probably gotten worse. She was getting bolder with it. Eventually, she would have stolen enough that the community would have faced serious financial problems. You stopped that. I was just defending my property, I said. You were doing what was right, Marcus corrected. Even when it was difficult and people were mad at you, that takes character. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping hot chocolate and watching the festival. The new board's working out well, I said, changing the subject. Much better, Marcus agreed. Turns out when you have honest people making decisions for the right reasons, things actually work. Who knew? We both laughed. As the evening wound down and people started heading home, I walked back to my house through the gently falling snow. The Christmas lights on my house glowed warmly. My generator sat silent in the backyard, ready for action if needed, but content to rest for now. I went inside, made myself dinner, and settled in for a quiet evening. The drama was over. The community was healthy. Life was good. The generator had done its job in more ways than one. Looking back on everything, I realized that the most important lesson was about standing firm on principle. It would have been easier to give in, to avoid conflict, to just let Brenda have her way. But easy is not always right. Sometimes, you have to accept conflict in the short term to create positive change in the long term. My generator, the simple backup power system I had installed to keep my house running during outages, had become a symbol of resistance against overreach and abuse of power. It had exposed corruption, triggered reform, and ultimately made the community better for everyone. And it still sat in my backyard, humming to life whenever the power went out, doing exactly what it was designed to do, keeping my home powered on my terms, with my property rights intact, ready to serve me and only me whenever I needed it. That was exactly how it should be.